we're going to start, but we're not going to finish this whole thing today. But we're going to start on talking about what it is. We're supposed to not turn, don't turn the page. You get scared if you turn the page. What it is that can make food chametz. Okay? So on this first page is going to be the simple things. Okay? The simple things that we know of chametz. And then when we turn the page, it's going to get more complicated. Things that get more sophisticated, more complicated. And the idea is, what we're going to talk about is, we know the simple things we make chametz from. You take the chameshes min dagan, you put them in water for 18 minutes, then it turns into chametz. So we all know. You see, with the very first list is you have bread and cookies and pasta. Everybody knows that those things are chametz. Okay? No one has to tell you that if you have pretzels, that those are chametz. They take flour, they mix it with water, and it sits for however long, and it becomes chametz. Those things are partial. But what we're going to do as we go through this is you're going to find out how come people think that toothpaste has chametz in it. Where does it come to it? When I look at it, what do I see over there that tells me that this thing should be chametz? I don't know. We'll get the million examples we're going to have. Even things like pickles. Okay? Where does the pickle that I'm holding come to being chametz? Okay? What's the shaykhs? Where does the things that are simple chametz? We know what they are. Okay? We make cookies in our house, so you know that if you take flour and water and you add some things that makes cookies, we know that that's chametz. The shaykhs, where do all these other things come that they should maybe be chametz? When we talk about it, you'll see, but that hagam that there's chashas of chametz on many things. We're going to list many foods that have chashas of chametz, but most of them are really not going to be chametz. We're going to be mafkid, we would never eat it unless we knew that it wasn't chametz. But we're going to see, as we explain how it could be chametz, you'll see why it's not chametz. Okay, so that first list on the chitim is things that were obviously chametz. Okay, after that came things that were not so pashut. Maybe not. You would not have thought of that first. And the first one is flour. Why do you think that flour is chametz? So the Gemara talks about what? No, that wasn't on that. No, that's not what it told you. But flour, the Gemara talks about that they used to take wheat, and before you would grind the wheat, when you grind the wheat, you want to get up the outer layer, the part that's not good, the psoilus. And when you do that, you make it wet first before you do that, and it helps the outer layer come off better. Okay, it's called l'sisa. Okay, in the Beis Hamikdash, you have to do l'sisa to the flour, so you should have finer flour. It comes out a whiter flour. Okay, in the Beis Hamikdash, they knew how to do l'sisa, and it didn't become chametz. The flour in Kabbalah says now it'd be chametz. There's an issue deraisa. Now to make it chametz. So they had to do l'sisa with water, and it shouldn't become chametz. Okay, and they knew how to do that. So, but already the Goinim say that we're not bekim and how to do l'sisa. So we wouldn't do l'sisa and be sure that we didn't turn into chametz. Okay. So already 100 years ago, Pesach spoke about, in times of Mishabur speaks about the way they used to do l'sisa. They would mamish soak the grain in water for a long time, and that was considered vadei chametz. That's what the Pesach earlier had spoken about, said it was safek chametz. That they called vadei chametz. Okay, so what about the way they do l'sisa? We don't, not exactly, in English we call it tempering. Okay, they don't do l'sisa the same way they used to do it. Nowadays they take the grains, they sprinkle a drop of water on it, very, very tiny amount of water on it, and then it sits like that for 10 hours, 12 hours, for a very long time, with a tiny, tiny amount of water on it. Okay, so they took these grains. The shaila was, is it as bad as the way the Mishabur talks about it, that's vadei chametz, or is it safek chametz? They took these grains, they brought it to Rav Naishlos, they brought in a sample of it. He took what he saw, he talked with Moshe Feinstein about it, and they talked it over, they looked it over, they saw, what? Yeah. And they saw signs of chimutz in some of them. Okay, little signs of chimutz in some of them. I guess they know what they're looking at. And they said in the end, when they were finished with it, they said, people should treat it like safek chametz. Okay, like the way it used to be, a few hundred years ago. The way the place can talk about a few hundred years ago, that it's safek chametz. And the Mela, so what they were talking about was if a person could sell it. There are people who have the minhag not to sell chametz. There's all kinds of different, dargas in that minhag. They have a minhag not to sell chametz. They said, a person could sell because they should only treat like safek chametz. But a safek it is. Okay, so it means is if you have in your house, you have flour, you can't keep the flour on Pesach. You could, if you sell chametz, you could sell it, or you get rid of it. Okay, but that flour, that's chametz. Okay, lafuke. I'll skip ahead to the bottom over here. It talks about spelt and rye and barley. Spelt and rye flour. Those don't have l'sisa b'chlal. They don't have l'sisa. No one makes them wet. So if you have rye flour in your house, you can keep that. That's not chametz at all. They're not just ground up grains, and there's no chametz at all. But to wheat flour, the regular flour that you have in your house, that's made wet in the way they make the wheat. And we treat it as safek chametz. Okay. The next after that is something called sourdough. In Lashon Kodesh called sar. Okay, that the Torah says that Sa'ar is chametz. Okay, so Sa'ar, just to explain, they make Sa'ar today exactly the same way they made it, 1,000 years ago. It's the same thing. And that is like this. When you want to make bread, you take flour and water, and if you let it sit, it'll rise, it'll become bread. It'll become bigger and become bread. But you need another ingredient, that's yeast. Okay, but if you just put the flour and water together, there's yeast floating around in the air, and they'll get into it and make it turn into bread. But we don't want to wait. It takes a long time until enough yeast gets into it. So nowadays, what we do is you open up a little package, you rip open a package, and you pour yeast into it. Okay, that's coming from where we'll talk about, not this time, some other time, when we get there later, where that yeast comes from. That yeast is not chametz. Okay, but where that yeast comes from. But how does a baker do it? If you go to a bakery, they don't take yeast from a little package. What they do is like this. When they make bread today, they take a ball of that dough, a little bit of it, and they put it in a warm spot. But usually they put it next to the oven, a nice warm spot. And that little ball of dough has a little bit of yeast, just a little bit of yeast is in there. And that yeast for the whole day, it sits for a whole 24 hours, the yeast multiplies. It gets more and more yeast. Okay? By the end of the day, after a whole day of sitting there, that little ball is full of yeast. Okay? And it tastes awful. Okay? That's why it's called sourdough. It's sour. Okay? It tastes horrible because it's not flour and water anymore. Now it's full of yeast. Okay? It's a whole bowl full of yeast. And like the Gemara says, you could use it to be mechameh isis acheres. What the baker does is he takes that ball, throws it into the flour and water tomorrow, and now he just threw in a whole bowl of yeast. That's really what he did. He put in a whole bowl of yeast. He mixes it up. He takes another bowl and puts it on the side for tomorrow's bread. Okay, that's what he does. Every day he puts a piece on the side for the next day. So even though that thing is not royal achila, the ball that after it sat for a whole day, the Gemara tells us, and it's partial, it's not royal achila because it's disgusting because it's all full of yeast. It's not royal achila, but the thing is that it's also because it's royal chameh but isis acheres. It could still be used as a food, and the mela it's chametz again. It's chametz with the rice. The Torah tells you now to keep it even now. It's even a value to hold on to such sa'ar. Okay, but most of us don't have sa'ar. Okay, some people in their houses bake with sa'ar. In fact, they go to the bakery and they buy sa'ar from the bakery. Okay, but most people don't. Most people in their own houses don't use sa'ar. They use yeast from a package. Okay, we get all the way to the very end. You'll find out where they make yeast from. Okay, but our yeast is not chametz. In my house, we keep the yeast. Okay, we know it's not chametz. But if you use sa'ar, if you use sourdough, then that's 100%. That's the Torah tells us that's also midrash. That's chametz. Okay, that was the second column over here. Okay, the third column is some foods that, if you just look at the ingredients, you just read what's in it, so maybe people don't realize, but you have to, if you look at the ingredients, you see it right there in front of you, okay? Some of you know maybe because you think about it because of the Hilchos Brachos. That licorice, okay, one of the first ingredients is usually wheat flour, okay? The wheat flour is suffolk chametz before you make licorice at it. Once you put into licorice with everything else, by then it's Barley chametz, okay? And pet food, I don't know if you have pets or something, but pet food, there's lots of chametz in it. And Pringles and soy sauce. Soy sauce is made from two things. Soy sauce is made from two grains that are fermented to become soy sauce, and usually the other grain is wheat. Usually, if you look at the ingredients, you'll see soy is the first, and usually after that comes wheat.
First thing is benefiber.
Benefiber is a laxative. It's like a medicine, but it's a powder. It comes as a powder, and if you look at the ingredients, it's only one ingredient. Okay, wheat dextrin. Okay. That's what it is.
Benefiber is the name of a medicine?
It's a brand name of a medicine. Yeah, it comes as a powder, and you mix it with a drink, and you drink it. You take No, Benefiber, that's the name. It comes in, other people make it under the same other names, but no, Benefiber, it is what it is. And you take it in a spoon, put it into a drink, and you drink it up. It's regular food. There's only one ingredient. It's wheat dextrin. That's the ingredient in it. It's chametz. And then, we don't have time for this now, but Play-Doh, okay? Play-Doh is listed on here because Play-Doh is made from flour and water. That's the ikka of what it is. There's a very big shiloh as to whether it's chametz or not. Turns out that it's not chametz, it's not osur anyhow. That's not for now. It's not royal achil. The shiloh whether that makes it mutter anyhow. It's a whole shiloh. For a different night. Next year we'll talk about it. It's a shiloh where the Play-Doh is really osur. Most people get rid of it. But you have to just at least know to think about it is that it's made out of flour and water. Okay? It is flour and water. That's what it's made of. Okay? And then the last group over here is there are some foods that there's nothing chametzig about the food b'chlal. Nothing about it that would be chametzig, But the way they sell it is always mixed with something else. Okay, and the one that most of us see is the sweeteners like Splenda, NutraSweet, and Sweet and Low, whichever one you use. The thing that makes it sweet is so powerful that you can't use it by itself. In other words, the amount of sweetener that you put into your coffee is just one speck. Okay, it's too tiny. You can't work with it. For normal people, can't work with that tiny. There's nothing there. It would be too small to work with. You'd open up the package and one little grain would fall out. It's not going to work. So they had put in other things just to make it bigger. Okay, just that you could use a spoon to get it out, or you could open up a package. So the other thing that's in there sometimes is chametz. Okay, so they put a starch in there. We'll see what starch is soon, but suddenly they put a starch in there to make it just bigger, just because you can't work with such a tiny little amount. Okay, and I wrote here also instant coffee. The way they make some instant coffees is when they make instant coffee, really they make a big pot of coffee, a really big pot of coffee, and then they boil all the water out of it, okay, in a special machine called a spray dryer. Okay? How it works is not so important, but sometimes to help it work better, they put starch into there to help when they boil the water out for it to hold together better. Okay, so some of those things have dill seeds, not dill the leaves, dill seeds, the little seeds. It's not chametz. It's a. I was going to talk about it, but the Ramah says that these things are anise. It's listed in Ramah by Kitnius. He says anise, aleph, nun, yud, samach. Anise, these are all versions of anise. It's not Kitnius. Ramah says that. That's because there's a rule that spices are not Kitnius. That's a cloud, but spices are not Kitnius. But the Taz and Magen Avraham speak about over there that these things grow right next to Chameshus Mini Dagan, and it's very common that they get mixed into the Chameshus Mini Dagan, and that's what the spice people who make spices today tell you the same thing. The people that it has it. I was in a place where they blend spices, and he scooped it up. He opened up a bag from no place. You just open up a bag, you know what I mean? And if you look through it, you see wheat mixed into it. Okay, because it just, for whatever reason, they grow next to each other. Okay, that's whatever, I'm not a farmer. For whatever reason, it grows next to each other. So the same thing, it's a Taz and Magen Avraham about it. So we tell people to treat it like kidneys. It's not bad, it's not kidneys. The Ramah says it's not kidneys, but we treat it a little bit like kidneys because it has Chameshus Mini Dagan mixed into it. Okay? Okay, we'll move on a little down to Shibboleth Shul, to oats. So the first thing is, I'll mention, I'll tell you half the shiloh, and that is, there's really a machlokes rishonim what Shibboleth Shul is. The Mishnah tells you the 5 mini dagam that can become chametz, and one of them is Shibboleth Shul. There's a machlokes rishonim what it is. The Aruch has 2 pshatim about it. The Rambam says that it means a kind of barley. There's a kind of barley that it means. But Rashi says it means oats. That's what Rashi says, that it means oats. And that's mukubal, that Shibboleth Shul means oats. Like Rashi says, and like many Rishonim learned, that Shibboleth Shul is oats. But it's always been mukubal that that's what it was. So I'll just mention to you that there are scientists who question that, okay, who are not so convinced that Shibboleth Shul is possible it could be oats. They ask that the tinus have to do with nothing to do with halacha. Have to do with whether oats grew in Eretz Yisrael in the times when the Mishnayos were written. Nothing to do with halacha. Okay? Nothing to do with anything. Just the scientific proofs as to whether it could be. But it's very mukubal that it means Shibboleth Shul means oats. And the way you make oats, all the other Chameshus Mini Dagan, let's say you take barley. Okay? You let it dry itself out, and then it could stay forever. It'll never spoil. It just sits there. You can leave it for 100 years and it's not going to spoil. But oats, if you just let them get dry, they're going to spoil. So the oatmeal that you have in your house, before they let it sit, they have to heat it in order to kill a bacteria that lives on it, and then it doesn't get spoiled and it lasts for a long time. So sometimes when they do that heating, they do it with moisture on it also. Okay, there's liquid, they use steam when they do that heating. Okay, that's a shiloh of a thing called chalita. Chalita, which is Bisman and Gemara, they would take the Chameshus Mini Dagan, they would dunk them into boiling water. They bring water to a boil first, and when the water was ready boiling, they would drop the grain into it. Okay, it's the Torah calls it. What's the Torah called? Like the pasuk that says you should eat. You can eat only Yashan says I forgot the pasuk. Anyhow, the pasuk describes how you make it. That you take the chameshes meat and you dunk them into boiling water, and once you did that, it can't become chametz anymore. Once it hit boiling water first, it doesn't become chametz anymore. If you do it right, it doesn't become chametz anymore. So really, if they did the oats in the right way, it wouldn't become chametz. It will never become chametz, and it would be mutter to keep it. Okay, but we're not bekim in how to do chalita. We don't know how to do that, so we treat those things as suffer chametz also. So if we don't know whether it was done with water or not, but if it was done with water, then we treat it like suffer chametz because we don't know how to do chalita. We treat such things as suffer chametz. Okay. The three things on the bottom, spelt and rye and barley, those are three of the chameshes meat dagan, but they don't have any contact with water. So if you have barley in your house sitting challenge, it never touched water. Okay, when they do something to barley, it's called pearling. Maybe you saw on the bag it says pearl barley. Pearling means they scrape off the outer layer to make it have a nicer shape and to taste better. But there's no water. Okay, there's no water b'chlal in the whole way they do that. So that became chametz. No, it's not chametz. It never became chametz. Nothing happened to it. So these things, spelt flour and rye flour and barley just the pieces of barley. It's not chametz b'chlal. You can keep them. I mean, you could really make matzah if you wanted to. If you want to really make matzah in your house. 100 years ago, everybody made matzah in the house. So if you wanted, you could really take rye flour. You could buy kemach v'nashuk. That's really the thing. You could buy kemach v'nashuk to make flour. That's what. So rye flour is mamash kemach v'nashuk. You can make matzah out of it. What? Spelt. I'm saying, but you can do it in your own house. You can just go buy spelt flour in Koltov and go make matzahs at home for Pesach. If you're courageous, you can do it yourself. But I'm not sure most people would want to do that. But I wouldn't. You can't do it with wheat flour. The wheat flour was wet. It's suffer chametz. But if you want to use spelt flour or rye flour, okay. If the oilam here was an oilam who ate machine matzah, I'll explain to you why there's a mile to eat machine matzah from spelt and rye. Let's not really don't worry about that. Okay. So
it got mixed in.
In what?
Store, a little wetness could come to the flour.
So you could be chayshish for that, but the din is you're allowed to buy kemach v'nashuk, mamash v'nashuk, not just even fancy bags. The din is you buy kemach v'nashuk and make matzah and eat it at the start. Okay, it's not shmura. You can't have to say that. You can't, but you can eat it the rest of Pesach. You can just buy kemach v'nashuk. Our kemach is much more protected than 100 years ago. I mean, it's in a fancy bag. You don't have to be chayshish for those. So matzah shmura. It's not like that. Matzah shmura means someone's making extra careful that it never got wet. But minadin, you could buy just kemach v'nashuk. That's something. A bag of rye flour is kemach v'nashuk from 100 years ago. That's the same. Okay, ready to turn the page? Okay. So what? You get to turn the page, yeah. So what I did for this page is like this. Really, this picture that you see here is really much bigger. Okay, and as we turn the pages, the picture's going to get bigger and bigger. But it's just frightening to see the whole page, or the whole picture all at once. Okay, so what I did was I broke the picture down into little pieces. Okay, we'll do one piece at a time. So we slowly till we get to see the whole picture. Okay, the whole picture by itself is most people find too scary. Okay, so the first thing is like this. You see on this page, what says here, page 2 on the bottom. Okay, the page is like this. It says, if you take barley, there's mamish I don't know what to say. It's a pella when you think about it. Okay, if you take barley, this doesn't work for barley in your house because they already peel off the outer layer. If you take a regular grain of barley, a whole grain of barley, and you stick it into warm water, so what does the barley do? It starts to grow. Okay, but there's something amazing that happens when it starts to grow. Okay, a barley, as we're going to hear, the chameshes meat dagan are made mainly out of starch. Okay, what is starch? I'm going to say this a bunch of times. What is starch? Starch is a sugar molecule. Okay, you don't need to know what that is. But sugar, like you have in your house sugar, it's a sugar, but instead of one sugar, it's thousands of sugars all attached to each other. Okay, when you have one sugar by itself, it tastes sweet. If you have a lot of sugars together in what's called starch, it doesn't taste so sweet. When you taste barley, it doesn't taste sweet. It tastes corn or potatoes. It doesn't have a sweet taste to it. It has it tastes like whatever it tastes like. But the starch has a bland taste to it. But the individual, it's made of thousands of sugars attached to each other. And if you were to have the individual sugars, they would be sweet. But altogether, it's not. Okay? Now, when you eat starch in your body can't use, we're very developed people. Your body can't use starch by itself. Your body has to break it down into sugar, And then they could use the sugars. The starch by itself you can't use. You have to first break it down. And after it's broken down to sugar, then your body could use it and you get whatever you get from it. So when you have a barley plant, the little plant is not nearly as sophisticated, as advanced as a person is. So how's the plant going to grow? The starch that's in there is to help the plant grow. That's what it's for. The Russian gave it starch so that it could start to grow. What's going to make it, how could it use the starch? So when you put it into warm water, that little seed of barley gives off an enzyme, and that enzyme breaks down the starch into sugar, and then it could start to grow. Now it has something to grow from. Okay, just like in your stomach that happened, it has something to grow from, and it can make roots and leaves, and a few leaves, and then it has enough koyach in that starch that it could start to grow. Once it has leaves and roots, then it grows from the ground like other plants do. But it's to get it started. That's what all the starch is to help it get started. But it can't do anything until it gives off an enzyme first. So in this little seed, in this tiny little seed, it makes an enzyme. It has a fancy name. It's called Barley beta amylase. Okay? You don't need to know that. But that enzyme is so chashuv that scientists don't make that enzyme by themselves. There's such a thing as beta amylase, but the best way to get it is from barley. Okay, they take barley, they steep it, they put it into warm water, and they let it sit there for a while. And when it sits there for a while, it gives off this enzyme to start breaking down the starch. Okay, we'll see later that sometimes the scientists chops that starch. We'll see as the starch gets bigger to use it for their own reasons. Okay, we'll see what they use it for in a second. But when you take barley, you could either get the enzyme. Sometimes people chop that enzyme, which is pure chametz. The enzyme, remember, it's barley sitting in warm water. Okay, barley sitting in warm water is chametz. Okay, or if you let the enzyme do its thing, the enzyme breaks down the starch, it makes something very sweet. Like I told you, starches become sweet sugars, and that sweet thing that it's called is called malt. Malt syrup, or barley malt, or malted barley, all that's the same thing. Okay, all that is this very sweet sugar that comes from making from barley. So, as you see here on the chart here, some of you see if you buy Rice Krispies. Okay, if you look at the Rice Krispies, come on, every type of it says that one of the ingredients is going to be malt syrup, or barley malt, or barley malt syrup, or some way of saying the same thing, and it's 100% chametz. Okay, that's pure chametz. They took barley, they let it sit in the water until the enzyme started being mechametz until it started sprouting. It started becoming like a little plant. Okay, I don't have pictures here to show you. But when you see the pictures, it starts to grow. Okay, it's 100% chametz. And then they stop it right where it is. They don't want it to turn into a plant. They stop it the way it is. And now that sweet thing that it became, they put into your Rice Krispies. Okay, or into your cornflake crumbs. Okay, that's what they put it into. You'll see it listed. This barley.
The barley itself becomes bigger?
No. The barley, the starch that's in here, breaks apart. It breaks apart. It stops being a starch. It becomes sugar instead. The best dogma that we have of what it is, this I should have brought in, is, did you ever see corn syrup? Corn syrup is a liquid. Okay. Corn syrup is in soda. Okay. What is that? It tastes sweet. It tastes like sugar. Okay. That's made out of corn. They did the same thing. They take corn, they break it down from starch into sugar, and then it's sweet like sugar. They make soda. When you buy this, you go buy Pepsi. That Pepsi is made sweet like corn syrup. That comes from regular corn that was broken down just like this into corn syrup. When some people you have at my house, we have corn syrup. I should have brought it. You should taste it. It tastes like sugar. It is. It's a liquid. It's like sugar.
Has corn inside it?
No, it doesn't have corn inside. It is corn. They take corn, use this enzyme enzyme that breaks it down. Not this one. They use an enzyme that breaks it down, and it breaks down from being starch, which is thousands of sugars together, into individual sugars. And those individual sugars taste sweet, like sugar that you put in your coffee. It's the same thing. It's the same, chemically, it's the same thing. So corn syrup tastes very sweet. That's why they put it into soda instead of sugar, because it tastes sweet. That's a fancier, it's called high fructose corn syrup, but it's corn syrup.
You can use barley also.
They could use barley to sweeten your yeah, but that wouldn't be kedai. They could, right? It wouldn't be kedai. But they use barley malt has a special sweetness and a special taste to it that fits good with cereal. It's a lot in cereals, and it's in things like you'll see it around. It's called malt or malted barley or something like that. And it's pure chametz. I mean, they took barley, they let it sit in warm water until it turned into chametz. Okay, that's 100% chametz. I mean, they took barley, they set it in warm water for a while. That's chametz. That's okay. Any question?
Barley itself, it becomes sweet.
The barley becomes sweet, yeah.
Does it become sweet?
Yeah, it becomes sweet. You ever eat barley in your chalent? It doesn't taste sweet. It tastes like barley. It has bland. It's like a potato. It doesn't have a sweet taste to it. But all of a sudden, that bland thing becomes sweet. It's the same way that corn becomes corn syrup. There's nothing else added into it. They take corn, break the corn into the sugars that it is, and that's it. It's sweet.
You don't have diabetes, no, you eat barley?
No, they can't eat right. They can't eat starches. No, because starches in your body, starch turns into sugar slowly. When you eat sugar, it's right away sugar in your body. For a diabetic, that's terrible. When you eat starches, in an hour it's going to be sugar. Because your body has to take time to break it down. But eventually it's going to be, diabetics don't eat starch. No.
They take the grain themselves and
they take the barley, like little pieces of barley that you put in your chalent, and they let it sit in water. It won't work in your house. Don't try this at home. It's not going to work in your house. But they try to have the whole barley, and they sit it in water, and it becomes sweet. Then they stop it. And they grind it up, and that's it. They starch. What?
Our barley is also starch?
Yes, it's almost completely starch. It's starch. The reason why it's starch is because the Bershom gave it so that the plant could grow. It needs koyach to grow. It can't grow until it has a leaf and has roots. So how's it going to grow for the first 3 days? So the Bershom gave it a little package of energy to go. That's what it has. It's all starch. I mean, come on, all starch.
Same thing. You put it in warm water.
You can't do it because they've already peeled up the outer layers of it.
What's in the outer layers?
No, actually, the inside has the endosperm, the part that's going to grow. It's not whole anymore. It's missing things else that it needs to grow. It has starch. The other parts, the starch sugar is completely, so if you had full barley, regular, real, before it's pearled, the whole barley, it works. I have a video. I can't show you a video here, but I have a video of it, of what it looks like. And I go and have pictures. That I could bring. I'll bring you pictures maybe once. You can see what it looks like. As it starts, it gets it soaks in water, it gets bigger because of that. But then if you let it for long enough, it starts to grow. Roots, and it's starting to go, but they don't want it to do that much. Then they stop it. They grind it up, and then So that stuff is 100% chametz. Okay? So we'll see. Okay. Ready to turn page. Okay. So those things are pure chametz. That's for sure chametz. Okay. So now we turn to page 3. You'll see what I did now is that I shaded out, the parts that we're not talking so much about. You can still see it, but it's just shaded out. So you should just look at the part that's not shaded. Okay, that's like this. Now, on page 2 we saw that if you take barley, it could turn into malt, because that's what happens when the barley turns into its sugar. What happens if you take the enzyme? What? This box is supposed to explain to you how I made these boxes. If I made one box with an arrow, that means it turns into that thing. If I made it just with a line, and then it's an ingredient. And the double line, you don't see it. That's coming soon in a few pages. That means a different thing. Okay, that's just to help you understand how I made my funny pictures. Okay? So barley by itself, it gives off this enzyme, and it turns it into malt. Okay, the enzyme turns it into malt. What happens if you chop the enzyme from the barley, which is very common? They take the enzyme, they don't let it turn into malt. As soon as it gives off the enzyme, they chop it, and they want to use it for something else. So instead of putting the enzyme into letting it work on barley, it's a liquid. I mean, you don't see one piece of it. They skim it off. They take it away. Instead of using it from barley, they put it to a different grain. Okay, it'll do the same thing. They put it into corn or wheat or potatoes, any other grain. It'll do the same thing. It'll break down the starch and turn it into sugars. Okay, it turns into a special kind of sugar that's over here. That it says here. It's called maltose. Okay, you already have why the name is called maltose. It's called maltose because it comes from the enzyme that comes from barley that would be malt. But scientifically, it has a special characteristic, the way the sugars are set up. It's 2 sugars, whatever, it has a special characteristic. But for us, it's obvious, we understand why they call that special sugar maltose, because it comes from the same enzyme that would have made malt if it had done what it was supposed to. If it would have been supposed to, it could have made malt, but they chopped it, and they put it into something else. Okay, now whatever starch they put it into, it's going to make the same maltose. That if they put it in potatoes, that won't be chametz. Well, the potatoes aren't chametz. But what it has now is, it has a maimid that was chametz. You took a potato that tastes like a potato, and all of a sudden it tastes sweet, like a candy. Okay, when you're going to eat candies on Pesach, they're made with potato or tapioca syrup. Okay, they don't use corn syrup because it's kidneys. So they make it out of tapioca syrup or potato syrup. Okay, they take a potato, and all of a sudden it turns into a candy. It has potato don't taste like candy, because they break the potato down or the tapioca down into sugars, and all of a sudden now it's candy. Okay, now you put some color and flavor into it, and it's a candy. Okay, that's how they're making that out of any starch. You can make it out of it. Now, if they made it with barley, if they used this enzyme from barley, then it had a maimed that was chametz. Okay, come on, everybody thinks that's considered a hamada. Okay, it turned, first of all, the solid became a liquid, but also the taste became very, very different. It used to taste like potatoes, and now it tastes like sugar. Okay, that's a big change. When you make a big change with something, then that's considered a maimed. It's bottle. It would be bottle. I mean, there's only a tiny amount. But in din, that's considered a maimed, and that's also from Pesach. Okay? Kenza is even Bal Yira Midrabanan. Probably not Midraisa, Bal Yira Midrabanan. You're not allowed to keep such a thing even if it had a maimed that was chametz. So if you have maltose, you see here that you can use maltose to make hard candies. Okay? Maltose has a special thing it doesn't. They tell me that one of the reasons why they use it in certain candies, is because it makes a sugar that doesn't stick onto the wrapper. Okay, so if you want to have your candy not stick onto the wrapper, so they use a special sugar that has such a thing that doesn't stick. It's just as sweet, but it doesn't stick. Okay, so whatever reason, so if you have a candy that has maltose in it, so mistama, the starch was not chametz, mistama was not chametz, but it has a maimed that was chametz. You know that this thing had a hamad that was chametz, so you're not allowed to keep it in Pesach. Okay, that thing it's probably only us midrabana, but it's Bal Yira. You can't. The Mishabur is mashma. It would be chametz trouble of Pesach if you kept it on Pesach also. Okay? Then if you do something fancy called hydrogenation, okay, you don't need to know what that is. Then the maltose becomes maltitol. Okay. Okay, do you see that's why that one has an arrow instead of a line? That's what the thing on the bottom is just to tell you. You see, the maltose could become maltitol. It doesn't become a hard candy. It's an ingredient. It could become. Okay, we don't need to understand what happens, but it's something called hydrogenation. Okay, it's a fancy name, and turns maltose into maltitol. Okay, and maltitol. Here, one of the places using is used in gum. It's very common in gums that are supposed to be sugar-free. Okay, because maltitol is officially not a sugar. Okay, so it's sugar-free gums. Okay, so it'll have maltitol in it and other things. You'll see it listed as an ingredient. So it's called, the malt part of it is already, it tells you should be careful. Something's going on over here. But it's called that because the enzyme that would have been made malt was instead used to make the special sugar. And now we went another step and we call it maltitol. Okay, what that means is not so important to us. We turned it into maltitol, and so now we have again something that had a hamad of chametz. Okay, so those things, the maltose and maltitol, Mistama are not made from. They could be made from chametz. They were, but Mistama they weren't. Okay, so I'll tell you something now. I don't know if we have more time. Let me just tell you, stop here for a second, and then it's like this. I'll have to tell you one more thing, and then I'll stop. This thing first. How does a person who wants to make maltose decide if he should use potatoes, or corn, or wheat, or tapioca? How does he decide which one he wants to use? The end thing is going to be the same. How does he decide? Should he start with potatoes or corn? How does he decide that? Make that decision which one he should use? So the answer is, whatever's cheaper. Okay? Whatever's easy to get, that's what he's going to use. So that means if that person was making that decision was sitting here in Chicago, okay, in Chicago, the easiest and cheapest thing to get is corn. In America, we have loads of corn. Okay? We use wheat for things like making cookies and bread that need to be with wheat. Things that can be from any starch, so they use corn, because corn is cheap and it's available. I'm not saying that everybody does it, but they're that's what they're going to do, because it's the easiest thing to get. If that person was living in China, okay, in China they use sweet potatoes, because that's what they have a lot of. Okay, that's what they have. And if they were in Japan, they would use rice. Okay, that's what they have a lot of, and it's cheap. Okay, so I'm saying you here already now. This is different. Here would have been kidneys, and in China it would have been not chametz at all, except for the maimed may have been, but it wouldn't be chametz at all. Okay? But if they were doing it in Europe there's lots of wheat. Europe, half of the grains that they're using are going to be wheat. So if you get the same candy that you buy over here that has maltose, that was made in America, it just has a maimed of chametz. If that candy was made in England, then it probably doesn't have a maimed of chametz. It probably is the Ethyl chametz. Probably made out of wheat itself. Okay, so depending on where you got the thing from, it tells you if you buy it in America, it's kidneys with a maimed of chametz. Okay, that's bad enough. That's awesome with Rabbanon. If I bought the same candy made in France, well, then that candy is mistam, not just a maimed of chametz, it's probably 100% chametz. The whole candy is chametz. The whole thing used to be wheat. Okay, and it doesn't look like wheat b'chlal. Okay, but that candy, it came from something that's 100% chametz. Okay, depending on where you got it from. Again, it's not always like that. It could be in Europe it was kidneys, and in America it was chametz. But derech klal, that's how they make these things. Based on what it is. Okay, the one last thing to tell you is, you probably heard of. This is another example I could have told you before of soy milk or rice milk. Okay, what is soy milk and rice milk? Okay, soy and rice are not liquids and they don't taste sweet b'chlal. Okay, soy milk and rice milk is exactly what I just told you until now, which is you take starch, like rice, you break it down into sugar, and all of a sudden rice goes from tasting like rice, which has a simple, bland taste to it, and all of a sudden it's a liquid, and it tastes sweet. Okay, that's what rice milk is. Rice milk is just rice that was broken down into sugars. From being starch, it became sugars. Okay, so rice milk and soy milk are very often broken down with this enzyme made from barley. Okay? Sometimes it's listed on the ingredient. It even says barley beta amylase. Sometimes it says that. Sometimes it doesn't. It just says enzyme, or it doesn't say anything. Okay? But very often the way they make it is they break it down. So rice milk, you say, what could be chametz about the rice milk? It's just rice. That's the truth. It's just rice with some vitamins added in. So we'll talk about vitamins someplace down here, maybe towards the end. But why the vitamins could be chametz. But the rice milk itself could have a hamad of chametz. And it had a hamad of chametz, because the way they turned the rice or the soy into rice milk or soy milk was they used, if they did this way that you see on this page here, page 3, then what you have in front of you has a maimed of chametz. Okay? So then you're not allowed to keep it. Okay? So that would be also in Pesach. So there are brands that are not, and there are ways you can get rid of kids who need it, or people who are chaylim, people who can eat kidneys. I mean, they're both kidneys. But people who are allowed to eat kidneys, if they work on it hard enough, they could find one that's not chametz. Okay? But stamazai, if you have one in your house, then you can't keep it because it has a hamad of chametz. Okay? So that thing might be a maimed of chametz, which would be us with everyone to keep it. Okay? I'd rather not to eat it, but us is everyone to keep it. Okay? Shais, you want me to stop here? Stop here. Okay.